Against all expectations, the always icy and heartless Gretchen actually donned a uniform to get close to Krantz and secure the 6th Sila card. Gretchen struck various provocative poses, then had teabag snap photos to send to Krantz. Upon receiving the message, Krantz was overjoyed. Ignoring Lisa's objections, he insisted on keeping the appointment, saying he'd be back in an hour. Soon after, Krantz arrived at the hotel. After a few pleasantries, he wanted to get straight to the point, as Gretchen helped him out of his jacket. Seizing the moment to steal the card, Krantz suddenly said,
"I didn't bring it with me. My card, that is what you're looking for, right?"
Clearly, Krantz had been cautious, but considering Gretchen had borne his child, he spared her life. The attempt to steal the card ended in failure. The pressure ultimately shifted back to Michael's side. Michael received the message in utter despair because not having the 6th card meant all their efforts over the past days were in vain. With less than 6 hours left until the Sila decoder was to be moved, thankfully, Gretchen had give Michael a piece of information. Opening the envelope, Michael finally saw a glimmer of hope. He handed the photos from the information to Sarah, instructing her to deal with the person in them. Michael told Sarah he decided to join the main force in infiltrating the company's headquarters, putting off surgery until his return. With preparations complete, the escape team arrived at Gate Corporation to enter the underground space. Teabag hurriedly called Gretchen, but what they never expected was Trishan eavesdropping on their call. Indicating she was no ordinary person, Gretchen was surprised Michael started the operation without the 6th Sila card. Teabag, knowing Michael's character well after countless encounters, was certain Michael wouldn't act without a thorough plan. Meanwhile, Michael and the others had already arrived at the wall. From now on, they had to remain absolutely silent. No one was allowed to speak because sound waves could pass through the wall and be detected by sensors on the other side. Everyone hugged one by one. Their fate depended on the next 3 hours. Sucre, wrapping the drill with soundproofing material, carefully made a hole in the seam of the wall, while Mahone measured how much deeper they needed to drill. As Sucre was about to break through the wall, to prevent debris from falling to the other side, they wrapped a vacuum cleaner with soundproofing material to suck up the last of the debris. The first hole was finally made. They inserted a camera to monitor the movements inside the room in real time. Next, Michael wrapped cables connected to 2 batteries around an iron bar, creating a simple electromagnetic field. After powering the batteries, Sucre used the iron bar to skin the steel fiber wall, since the electromagnetic field would slightly pull on the steel reinforcement while the concrete remained relatively fixed. The widening gaps would eventually cause the concrete to compress and loosen, allowing for easy removal with just a couple of wraps. Lincoln and Mahone drilled 2 small holes on either side, then stuffed and opened umbrellas through them to prevent concrete from falling to the ground and making a loud noise. With another scan of the electromagnetic field, the wall was finally breached. The 4 men looked towards the ultimate goal inside the room. Finally seeing hope, they were about to enter what was known as the world's most impenetrable room, but what they could never have anticipated was the trap set by the enemy behind them. Gretchen quietly walked into an office with a bag, inside of which were heavy weapons. It turns out they planned to block the way and kill them as soon as Michael got Sila.
Only cherry that could top this sunny day. You can keep your Burrows and your Mahone and your Sucre. Just leave Schofield for me.
Their feet couldn't touch the ground, nor could they make any sound over 10 decibels, not even emit heat. They threaded a pole ring through a pre-drilled hole, then carefully hooked it onto a suspension ladder. As the ladder was extended, planks of wood were laid down to make it easier for people to walk. The high-sensitivity heat sensors detected human body temperature turning yellow, but they were ready for it. Sucre sprayed liquid nitrogen into the air to cool it, and the yellow light gradually turned green. However, just as they were about to reach their destination, the cable suddenly loosened. If the cooling gas fell to the ground and made a noise, the room's security alarm would immediately sound, leaving them no escape. In the nick of time, Lincoln hurried over to steady Sucre. They narrowly averted disaster. Minutes later, the gangway was finally installed, and Michael, carrying a backpack, took steps towards the ultimate goal. But suddenly, a severe headache struck again, and Michael nearly stumbled to the ground. Yet he bore the pain, daring not to make a sound. The hearts of the 3 behind him were in their throats. Michael's subconscious was awakened a little bit. He gave the OK sign to his companion, then he trembled to the glass door. This was the last line of defense for the Sila decoder. Michael set down his backpack, took out 2 suction cups and attached them to the glass, then used a tempered glass cutter to score a neat circle. Finally, He twisted open a canister of liquid nitrogen, spraying the cut track to cause an instant cooling and contraction reaction, easily removing the whole piece of glass. He carefully placed it on the ground. Under the watchful eyes of his 3 companions, they finally saw the legendary Sila decoder. Countless people had died in the quest for Sila. Michael couldn't help but gently touch it. However, the next second, the base's gravity sensor suddenly lit up red. In the office, Krantz received the alarm signal, immediately pulled up the surveillance, and was stunned by the scene before him. He ordered the building to be locked down and rushed to the basement with 2 elite subordinates, the elevator dinging directly to the room. Unexpectedly, Michael was surprisingly calm.
Drop him, or I blow his head clean off.
All of this was part of Michael's plan. He deliberately triggered the gravity sensor to lure Krantz down, making it easy to get the 6th Sila card. Krantz didn't resist and handed over the card, knowing it was useless without the other 5 cards Michael already had. But the next second, Krantz's expression froze.
Suck, General.
Krantz couldn't fathom how Michael had stealthily acquired the other 5 cards. Michael inserted the card into the slot. It turned out the 6 so-called Sila cards were merely keys to activate the decoder, while the real Sila was actually a core component hidden inside the decoder.
This is Sila.
Guess right now you wish you'd framed somebody else, huh, General?
You're not even close.
In front of Krantz, Michael packed Sila into his bag, but they didn't return the way they came. Instead, they used Krantz's retina to enter his office. This series of moves utterly baffled Krantz. After all, if his subordinates saw this, the entire company building would be locked down, with hundreds of armed agents ready, which seemed like walking into a trap. But Michael had already devised a foolproof escape plan.
We have a major situation.
Michael, thank God.
We got it.
How's it going on your end?
Pretty damn good. But give me 5 more minutes.
Gregory had just walked into Teabag's office when he spotted an assault rifle hidden in the corner. True to his battle-hardened nature, it took Gregory only a second to hide the shock in his eyes, feigning calmness and making up an excuse to leave the office. But the sharp-eyed Gretchen had already detected something amiss from Gregory's glance. Gretchen quickly picked up the rifle and strode towards Gregory's office, causing the employees to scream in terror. The situation escalated beyond control, forcing Teabag to take up arms in support, herding everyone into Gregory's office and then blocking the only exit. Minutes later, Trishan returned to the office, only to find it in complete disarray. Realizing something terrible had happened, she crouched down at the door, took out a key, and planned to sneak in to rescue. Teabag grew increasingly impatient, wondering why Michael and his crew hadn't emerged from the basement. He suspected they had found another exit and should evacuate immediately. Gretchen urged him to be patient, reminding him that $125 million was within reach. Their argument provided Trishan the chance to slip into Gregory's office.
It's okay. Got our agent. Now quick, I'm gonna help you.
It turns out Trishan's true identity was NSA agent Miriam. However, Gregory, a selfish coward, only cared about his own escape after being unbound, neglecting the safety of others. As Gregory dashed for the door, Gretchen put him down with a burst of gunfire. Gregory's escape exposed Miriam's whereabouts. A fierce shootout ensued. Realizing their position was untenable, Gretchen and Teabag quickly retreated.
Call 911.
At the parking lot, Gretchen instructed Teabag to wipe the fingerprints off the gun and throw it into a trash can, as walking around with a gun would easily attract attention. But the next second, Gretchen pulled out a handgun and aimed it at Teabag. Unexpectedly, Gretchen planned to eliminate Teabag to save herself and sever ties with Sila completely. But Miriam suddenly appeared, allowing Teabag to escape in the confusion. Knowing she couldn't stay long, Gretchen also fled in the opposite direction. Miriam chose to track Teabag, who once again ended up in police custody.
Turn around. Turn around.
Gentle now, sugar.
That's Special Agent Miriam Holtz to you, sugar. Now let's go.
Meanwhile, a large number of agents gathered in Krantz's office, ready with a battering ram to break in when Michael suddenly received a phone call. The call was on speakerphone, and to everyone's surprise, it was Krantz's daughter Lisa's voice.
It's Tancredi. She says if you don't let Michael and the others leave with Sila, she'll kill me. Dad?
Just 5 minutes earlier, a waiter bribed by Sarah had deliberately spilled soup on Lisa, who was dining out. While Lisa was cleaning up in the restroom, Sarah pointed a gun at her head. Krantz's complexion turned deathly pale. He had never disclosed his daughter's identity for over 30 years. How did this person know Lisa was his daughter? But it no longer mattered. As a father, Krantz reluctantly headed to the door, ordering everyone to back off, and led the four out of the office. Michael walked out of the building with Krantz, stating they would release his daughter once they were safe.
We did this to you. We did this to you.
After escaping pursuit, Michael officially handed Sila over to Don, declaring their mission complete and leaving the downfall of the company to him. Don handed over the relocation paperwork for everyone's release, promising to send a car to pick them up in half an hour to go through the process. After going through the process, they could live in peace and quiet. Immediately after Don finds Miriam, who turns out to have been his eyes and ears at Gate all along, Don asked Miriam if she knew who wanted to buy Sila. Miriam suggested Teabag might know, and if offered a sweet deal during interrogation, he would surely talk. But as soon as Miriam finished speaking, Don shot her dead. Teabag was dumbfounded. He would never have thought that this man could hide so deeply. Don's next move left Teabag utterly stunned. Don called the NSA leadership, falsely claiming Michael and the others had kept Sila for themselves, while simulating gunfire to fake his own death.
About this whole operation. No. Burroughs! Burroughs!
Don! By framing Michael successfully, Don made himself vanish from the scene. Unaware of the betrayal, Michael and his team celebrated and said their farewells, waiting for someone to come and restore their identities. They waited and waited, but no one came to pick them up and restore their identities. So they called and found out Don's number had been cancelled. Opening their pardon documents, they found nothing but blank papers. Realizing it had been a long-planned scam from the start, Don had monopolized Sila and pinned the theft on them, forcing them into a life of flight once again. Huddled in a dimly lit rental, they watched as the news broadcast Teabag and Gretchen's hostage situation at Gate Corporation. Michael suddenly realized that if Don intended to monopolize Sila for profit, he would definitely seek out Gretchen, as, apart from the deceased James, only she could connect with the buyers. Sure enough, at that moment, Don was on his way to find Gretchen, with the opportunistic Teabag sitting beside him. As long as there was money to be shared, Teabag would ally with anyone. Having seen Gretchen's file, Teabag knew she had a sister. Finding Gretchen's sister would lead them to her. Gretchen came to the place where she made the deal with Fong Huan and found that they had been killed by the company's man. It was then Lincoln unexpectedly called. Gretchen never thought that Sila would end up in Don's hands, so she simply teamed up with Michael and the others to take Sila. They agreed to meet in the park in an hour. However, just after hanging up, Rita called, revealing that Don had kidnapped Rita and Gretchen's daughter, Emily.
What's up, Gretchen? Time to come home now.
Gretchen rushed home in a panic. Don confiscated Gretchen's gun and mobile phone and found her phone records with Michael. With her family's life under threat, Gretchen had no choice but to reveal the park where she was meeting Michael. To eliminate any worries, Don immediately had Teabag report the meeting location to the NSA. Shortly after, Michael and his team arrived at the meeting spot. During that time, he made a call to the NSA leadership to explain that it was Don who had monopolized Sila. While on the phone, Michael heard the sound of a fire truck, and the next second, he saw a fire truck drive past in front of him. Realizing they had fallen into a trap, Michael quickly notified the others to evacuate. Meanwhile, Don had Teabag stay behind to watch over Gretchen's family while he took Gretchen to meet with a new buyer. After the meeting, the buyer confirmed it was indeed Sila, but a component was missing from the middle.
What are you talking about?
It's incomplete.
Incomplete? Who is this clown?
Clown?
Yeah, clown.
There's a piece missing, Slick. Look, here.
Don was taken aback, realizing Michael must have kept a piece. Sure enough, as expected, during their time in Krantz's office, Michael had discovered this chip and hidden it in the restroom at the base.
Hello, Don. I believe you have something that belongs to me.
Come and get it.